Welcome back to Science 10. This is the third video in the 2.1 Limits on Population assignment. So this will be the last one. On this page, limits of tolerance, we're going to skip that part and move right to density dependent and independent factors. So if we take a look here, the number of organisms in an ecosystem is important when considering the effects of some abiotic and biotic factors. A population is said to be dense when there is a large number of organisms in a small area. So when we're talking about density, it's like density with substances, a large amount in a small area. Or with density in science, we look at the mass per volume, but here we're looking at the number of organisms in a small area. You're very dense if there's a lot of organisms in a small area. For example, New York City would have a dense human population. Less dense would be a small number of organisms in a larger area. Okay? So density independent factors. Density factors that are independent affect members of the population regardless of population density. So things that affect a population that do not depend upon, or they're independent of, the population that's already there. So if you have a big population, these are factors that affect it that are not dependent upon how many things there are. So it's kind of confusing. Fire and flood, for example. It doesn't matter how many organisms are in an area, fire and floods happen, not due to how many things are there, but they just happen. Like if we're talking about accidents with humans, that's a different story. But here we're talking about ecosystems in the forest, etc., not human ones. So they are two naturally occurring events that are density independent. They're independent of the population itself. They affect a population regardless of how big it is. Okay? When the density of a population increases, other factors limit future growth or reduce population numbers. These are called density dependent factors. They depend upon how big the population is. So they affect a population because of the density of the population. So things like that are food supply. So of course if you have a lot of organisms or animals in an area, the more you have, the more limited food is going to be. Or water quality, or the amount of sunlight that's seen, or disease, of course, and territory. Those are all density dependent. They depend upon how big the population is. So for example, when a tree in a dense forest becomes infected with a fungal blight, the infection could spread more quickly than it would in a forest where there are trees or if they're separated by a large distance. Okay? So those are examples of density dependent factors. Similarly, individuals, more densely populated areas are more prone to starvation as food becomes lower in supply. Competition for food may leave animals weak or susceptible to being consumed by predators. Density dependent factors in Table 2 will cause high mortality rates, lowering the population density. When the population density is reduced, the effects of those factors will be reduced as well. So this table here is important. It kind of gives you some more examples. So we have density independent, so these things that happen not due to how big the population is. Flood, fire, spraying with pesticides, change in climate or temperature, destruction of habitat or drought. So those are outside factors where you can almost think of it as internal factors, factors that happen due to how big the population is. Food shortages, competition for mates or breeding areas, disease caused by microorganisms or parasites, introduction of an exotic species, later on we'll see what that means, increased predators, or competition for water and other resources. Okay, so that's the difference between density independent and dependent factors. Okay, the questions I would like you to do. Number 1, A and B for sure. So cedar waxwings are one of the few birds that can withstand the cold and lack of available food during winters. To ease the strains of winter, bird watchers in Barrie, Ontario provide food, seeds, to these cedar waxwings in winter months. So A, would the seeds alter the carrying capacity of that area? Explain. And provide a reason as to why bird watchers have noticed an increase in the falcon population. And it just so happens that falcons eat cedar waxwings, those little birds. Big birds eating little birds. Okay? 2A, we can do that one. So you're basically using all this information, comparing elephants and mice, and just organizing it on a table here. So you're looking at offspring per birth, which has more, which has less. So we can take that information, put it in here, and then B, not a paragraph, but in a few sentences, compare the biotic potentials of elephants versus mice. You can kind of predict what's going to happen there just from what we've mentioned earlier, but see if you can quickly organize that information there in just a few sentences comparing the two. A summary as to what you saw here. Question 3. Scientists studying wolves near Kirkland Lake noticed a steady decline in the population of wolves for 4 consecutive years. Make a prediction about how the population of wolves will affect the population of moose. So wolves eat moose. If the wolf population is going down, what would likely happen to the moose population? And give your reasons for that. B, assuming that humans are not the cause of wolf population decline, would it be reasonable to conclude that the wolf population will continue to decline until there are no more wolves left? Give your reasons. So it's kind of an opinion question, but the wolf population goes down, that's going to affect the moose population. Would the wolves die out? Write your prediction and give a reason. And then what might cause the wolf population to go up again? So again, kind of your reasoning there. And lastly, instead of using a flow chart here, sketch what you think a graph would look like that would show wolf population, how changes in the wolf population would affect the plant community surrounding Kirkland Lake. So it's kind of complex because moose eat plants, wolves eat moose, so what would happen to the plant community? Okay, looking at those wolves populations. So you can make a graph. If you wanted to, you could put the moose in there too. So have a graph something like this, and have one line for wolves, one line for moose, and one line for plant population. So kind of predict how those populations would affect each other. Okay. Number 4, and again, if you're having trouble with this graph, just come and see me and we can maybe look at it. Number 4, in an attempt to increase the local food supply for people, humans introduced 26 reindeer, 24 females, 2 males, to an island off the coast of Alaska. Figure 4 shows how the reindeer population changed. Okay, so 1910, they were introduced, and you can see the reindeer population fluctuated a bit until here, boom, just skyrocketed up to 2,000. Originally, starting with 26, in 30 or so years, reached that number and then drastically dropped until almost died out. A, speculate why more females were introduced than males. So why 24 females and 2 males? Why not equal amounts of each? B, by 1937, which is about right here, the reindeer population soared to 2,000. What evidence supports the hypothesis that the carrying capacity of reindeer had been exceeded? So what proof shows us that, oh my gosh, we had more than than that area was able to carry? C, reindeer feed on slow-growing lichens and moss. Would you expect to find more food for the reindeer in 1931 or 1935? Or 1950, where would you expect to find the most food for the reindeer? And explain why, of course. D, the introduction of a new species can cause major changes in the ecosystem or area of study. Should the reindeer have been put in the island? Explain your position. So this is an opinion question. You give your answer and explain why. Technological advances in agriculture have changed the carrying capacity for humans of most ecosystems. As we saw earlier, that human population graph is exponentially rising. Give some examples of agricultural advances and how they have affected carrying capacity. So what are some things in terms of agriculture that are done that can make the human population grow so big? So just think about what has happened over the past few hundred years in terms of agricultural advances. And then B, has the planetary carrying capacities for humans, have we reached it? Or can we grow larger yet without reaching the capacity? As opposed to an essay, just a few sentences explain your position. So this is your opinion here. Have we reached the maximum that we, as humans, have a carrying capacity for? Have we reached the human carrying capacity on the planet? Okay? So there you have it. We'll see you again, folks.